Before the special edition co-interview between myself and Soul of the Hip Hop and the Solecast, I'd like to make a few corrections to some of the stuff said. Pete Seeger was, in fact, the one who made The Banks Are Made of Marble famous, as Soul stated, although it was actually a creation of the pro-union apple farmer named Les Rice in the late 1940s and had nothing to do with Joe Hill. Also, the website of the International Anarchist Radio Network is a-radio-network.org. Finally, the J20 case was spoken of as going to trial on November 20th, 2017. However, the first trial has been pushed back earlier to November 15th. So, to find out how you can help in that instance, check out defendj20resistance.org. And to find more music and podcasts from the whimsical wizard himself, who is Soul, you can check out soleone.org.
Bottoms up. What up, Bursts?
Woo! I hope that came up.
Bursts, to the listeners out there, Bursts from Final Straw Radio just shook up a LaCroix can as if it was
a little bottle of champagne.
As if it was a little bottle of champagne. But it's not.
In my dreams. So, and I'm joined here with Soul. I don't know who's the host and who's the hosted, but
well, I mean,
it's collaborative, right?
Well, my house is my house. As we established earlier.
Egoist.
So yeah, no, we're co-hosting. We're co-hosting our joint podcast. This is my second official joint podcast, and I don't know how many joint podcasts you've done.
This is my first. I'm a noob, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Me too. I mean, you've been doing this for a minute, so.
Well, you too.
Well,
you're an inspiration.
I'm old.
Yeah. That's true. I'm not far behind. But one of the things that draws us together is our mutual participation in this project that Soul helped to spark in the minds of so many, the Channel Zero Network, which is super exciting to a lot of us. I just put the interviewer hat on. Do you want to describe for listenership, who I'm sure already know what CZN is, what's going on and how it came about? Yeah,
I mean, so basically, you emailed me a really long time ago because you met some of my friends and we just kind of crossed paths or whatever, and so, we had like a little connection there, and then just through conversations with people like It's Going Down and Submedia and other media organizations, over the years, I realized every time that I am bored, I throw on the C-SPAN app, and I just sit there and listen to these Senate intelligence hearings. And I keep telling people yo, you should check out the C-SPAN app, and they're all like,
and you just get made fun of.
Yeah, and everybody's like, wow, that's what's wrong with you? And I was like, I would love to see an anarchist equivalent of that, just really, nerdy, 24/7 talk radio, and again, or if it's not C-SPAN, it's NPR, and but part of that, goes back to. My experience of just organizing and activism over the years. I feel like a lot of the activism I've done amounts to gestures and symbolic acts, which are great and fine, and everything is necessary, but it became clear over the long haul that people who take time to build infrastructure and people who build infrastructure over time, that infrastructure, if it's useful, it gets used, it gets filled in, and it gets utilized, and it becomes vital stuff. So if we're talking about stuff like Submedia, and again, you look at what It's Going Down has accomplished, and so what through all these conversations that me and you and folks from It's Going Down and Submedia and Which Side, we started looking at all these other things, and what originally we was just going to do as a little radio thing, it became a podcast network. And then we decided, well, shit, what if we all just promote each other's work? And then it became a podcast network. And then for me, it's almost become not a workplace, but a sort of a federation or something, where I'm in constant contact with people like you or folks from Submedia or Crime Think or whoever, where I'm just constantly, and I feel like it's like inspiring me. I feel like it's pushing us all along, giving us encouragement. Because one thing about like these podcast projects is we don't get a lot of feedback on them. For the most part, we're like alone in our little corners of the world, putting this stuff out there, and like we don't know who's listening. We don't know what the fuck is happening with it. And so, like, I think one of the best things is just to be in a community with other people doing this. And so, and I feel like it's like inspiring us to do better. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think? What do you have to say about CZN?
I mean, I thought it was really awesome that I got brought into this conversation after I had been invited by the Anarchist Radio of Berlin into the Anarchist Radio Network during its first meeting in, I guess it was in Ljubljana, Slovenia. We had been sharing content with each other. They had reached out to us because they found an anarchist radio project on the Radio for All, basically podcasting platform. It was meant to be like an independent radio platform that carried all sorts of stuff, but it was founded by anarchists, and it's interesting. It works well when it works well, but so we collaborated a little bit. They were kind enough to take some questions from me, translate them, find someone who was involved in the Kreuzberg riots, in the Autonomen riots in 1985, I want to say, for a conversation about the Black Bloc as a tactic, and then conduct the interview, anonymize it, transcribe it, translate it, send it to us. And we've done sort of like back and forth sharing of audio that way. And so suddenly we get this invite to this larger network based in Europe of different anarchist radio projects and some podcasts. And we had just come back from attending one of the conferences, which is really fruitful, and it's awesome. Our website is now up for that network at aradionetwork.aspivblogs.org, I'm pretty sure. And then you had approached me, and this project has just flown along. Like, the website did not take very long to come up. Meetings have occurred on like a semi-regular basis, and it's awesome to share ideas and share perspectives with the different projects. And like you said, like in my case, I was already listening to a bunch of the shows that were already on here. I had already been listening to Which Side. I was listening to you. I was listening to It's Going Down, and Submedia. So yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of this community, and I think that we have an opportunity now to not only put all of these really good things in one place for someone to stumble upon and to share, but also to expand our knowledge base, increase the number of people and types of projects that are engaged in the network, and really rival, if not surpass, some of the far right organizing in that same manner. I mean, it's an opportunity to really grasp at people's hearts and minds, and I think that we're doing it from a very like honest perspective. Nobody's getting rich off of this. We're not actually getting Soros money yet. I filed a grant for it, but
we did get $1,400 through Indiegogo.
Woo! Thank you. But yeah, especially now with all these problems with the far right and the alt-right pressuring these popular platforms for fundraising, we're having to figure out new alternatives and new ways of doing it so we don't go under.
Yeah, I mean, and another, it's another thing I think that's really cool about this project is like having been involved in numerous media projects over the years, some that failed completely, some that became crazy power struggles, some that had shitty power dynamics. I like that this project in particular hasn't like been a rigid collective. It's been more, I see it more of like a federation or I guess a federation would be a better way of looking at it, or a network even, which is why it's called a network.
Ding.
And it's like, but it's still horizontally run, and we're not like guarding it like we're fucking gatekeepers or anything. You know, we've since the 5 or 6 podcasts from the beginning had it. As soon as it was announced, other people stepped to us. We added 4 more this week. We're about to add 5 more podcasts, and I mean, if it keeps growing like this with the level of quality of the people who are stepping to us, I can't wait. I'm like so excited when I think like, oh my God, I can't believe we did this. This is amazing, you know? So.
And with to address the gatekeeper thing too, it's not that every project that approaches us is necessarily getting into the network,
Right.
But in some cases, it's just a matter of like, what do we think works well with the other stuff that's already there, and what personalities work well or don't work well with the people that are already existent in the network. So maybe not gatekeeping so much as, we have an anarchist value is that we have the right to a free association, and we have the right of free not association, or deciding when we engage with people and when we don't on what platforms. So I don't know.
Right. I mean, yeah, and the only other thing I would add to that is like, because I've been in like, because we do operate on consensus, which, you add one asshole to a group when you're using consensus, and all of a sudden it's not so fun anymore. So, there's definitely that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can.
There's only room for like one asshole, and that's you.
Oh! Well, I'll do my best. God damn it. Yeah. Well, let's move on from that.
Bruce is definitely not an asshole. So I guess the next thing on our list was J20. So to those who don't know what J20 is, I mean, I assume everyone who listens to this podcast knows what J20 is, but to those who don't know, at the inauguration of Orange Cheeto
45,
number 45, what is it, 210, 207, 200 plus folks were rounded up and arrested in DC, and this was before the limo was set on fire. This is really before a lot of things happened that day. And so people who just happened to be in this area were all rounded up, and every single one of those people is looking at 75 years in prison. And this is, I personally really wanted to be there for this, but I couldn't afford to go out there. And so the thought that right now, as we're raising a newborn, that I could be looking at 75 years in prison, it really it hits me, and especially because we have friends or people we're connected to that are facing these charges. I just think it's really important to keep this on people's minds and to keep talking about it and pushing it. So what?
Yeah, I mean, one person that's already taken charges, the first person to get charged and convicted and start serving time, is Dane Powell. He has a kid. He co-parents a kid. He's a vet. He had done stuff at Standing Rock before that. He was very much impassioned around social justice issues. He's actually on video, picking up a kid and helping to block that kid from a pepper spray volley that's coming from the police.
By kid, you mean a child?
I mean a child, yeah, not a small goat. But a 10-year-old. Sorry. But yeah, a 10-year-old child, maybe 8-year-old child. This is a very brave individual to do that in that instance. And he's serving. He took a plea, I guess, because of life circumstances, and got 4 months, and is about to end that time inside. But yeah, so even if when he gets back out, he's still going to have that mark on his record that's going to make it difficult to get subsidy, that's going to make it difficult to get a job, that's going to make it difficult to get any sort of help with higher education. All sorts of things are going to be affected based on the prosecution by the city government with pressure from the federal government to sort of ruin the lives of anyone who would dare stand up during this largest inauguration ever in DC.
The biggest.
The huge.
Yeah, and I mean, it's. I mean, the thing with taking the plea is that I don't have a lot of friends who've gone to prison, but I think of my friend Chesky, who went to prison, and when he was going through the trial and the 2 year, I understand why someone would be motivated to take a plea in that situation, because almost it's almost like, God, just fucking shoot me, get it over with. The stress of waiting, for 2-3 years. I wonder how many years just it takes off of your life going through the stress of trial in court and just God, just
all the fundraising for legal fees, like your house, your pets, your family. Like, yeah, I have not gone to prison, but all that stuff weighs heavily on all the individuals. And this is at this point about 200 people around the country who are facing upwards of 75 years for 5 broken windows collectively. And the precedent, not only like is this horrible for the people that are going through it right now, but the precedent for mass arrests leading to large repression being upheld by the courts in the United States at this point in time is not going to bode well for social movements and for people in dissenting populations or like people that are already marginalized by this administration and past administrations, Democrat or Republican. It's going to set precedent that's going to endanger our right to oppose and to resist anything that the current administration or whatever administration happens to be in favor of. If they're going to talk about violence happening on both sides in Charlottesville, if they're going to talk about the like thugs and hooligans and Antifa, but talk about the good people that are on the like, there's good people among the white nationalist side. How does that bode for us when the state is acting on behalf of the white supremacists? The active white supremacists.
And not that I think this is how we should be looking at it, but I thought one of like the interesting tweets that I saw after Charlottesville was like, okay, and this was I believe this was from a journalist in Santa Fe, Aaron I'm not sure exactly, but who was looking at who was one of the J20 defendants, came out and was like, okay, as a J20 defendant, and I'm being charged 75 years for window, does that mean every fucking white supremacist is facing murder charges?
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And I mean, that's not the point anarchists would make.
Yeah.
But it really shows what the motivation. It shows you how politically motivated. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a crazy time. What a crazy time.
Yeah. And like besides the terror of that sort of charge being put on by the government, there is also, as you pointed out, it was a capture of about a block's worth of people in this march. Some of them were media, some of them were legal observers, some of them, like, who knows what their motivation was or what their activities had been. But to charge this mass amount of people it's totally unjust, which is not surprising, but it's absurd.
Yeah. And I guess, the thing that, I've said this before, but it's like the thing that really just blows my mind that I really can't wrap my head around it, because comrades who do radical media are all like, well, what do you expect? Of course NPR doesn't give a fuck. Of course Democracy Now! Doesn't give a fuck. And I'm like, but they should. And I don't understand why they don't. And it really... It because of the scale of these mass arrests, there's never been anything like this in American history, as far as I know. I just don't get it, man. Do you have any thoughts on why the fuck, why isn't that an NPR story? Why isn't that on MSNBC?
Nonprofit industrial complex. It's because they feel like they are going to lose their nonprofit status if they argue on behalf of people that are accused of breaking some windows. That's the only motivation I can possibly see as to why they would do that. It's because of utter cowardice.
But even the most passive, quote unquote, progressive liberal or whatever would know that 205 people can't break 5 windows. Mm-hmm. And
unless there's real teamwork.
Oh man, yeah. I don't know. So what? If folks listening and they want to help out, they should go to disruptj20.org. They should
defend J20.org. Defend J20resistance.org.
Okay, that's the better website.
Yeah, because Disrupt J20 was a site that was up before the protests. But yeah, the public defense and fundraising site is defend J20resistance.org.
And I guess like little updates on J20 stuff. Speaking of the disruptj20.org, there was going to Jeff Sessions or whoever had or the DC district attorney subpoenaed DreamHost to get the IP address of every single person who'd visited disruptj20.org, right?
Yep. And initially that was blocked by one judge and then accepted with stipulations by another judge. So everyone who visited that site, like I assume it's for the cross-referencing of people that were arrested with having visited that and the accusation of conspiracy charges to be given to the host of the site, but or some sort of like prior motivation to be assigned by the prosecution. But it still doesn't bode well for people that were curious about finding out what people were having to say, what people's anxieties and interests were of the time, if the federal government can just swoop in and collect, blatantly collect our like search engine information and the sites that we visit.
It's fucking
boy, what a depressing topic.
I know. I mean, it's just like it's so dystopian to me that I really like people who listen to our podcasts. I hope that they do what they can to get the word out, even if it's just harassing Democracy Now! Because I know people disagree, but I really think that like if Democracy Now! Was to like really focus on this subject, I think it would actually help turn the tide, and it really bothers me that they don't. And
yeah, it's really flawed. And I think like even if it didn't create a large shift in tide, it would get the name out there. It would get people to give to the nonprofit supporting the prisoners. It would have it on people's lips more. Can you think of any ways that like people that are listening to this that haven't been engaged so far and maybe don't know anyone who's caught up in the case might be able to help to, besides harassing Democracy Now?
I think those are excellent ways. Yeah. I think if a lot of people were to write like whatever the media at Democracy Now, like I think if enough people were to write to these, media platforms to get people more attention on the subject. I mean, to me, that seems like if Rachel Maddow, or I know it sounds ridiculous, but like I think like targeted online campaigns, getting these people to give a fuck. And I know a lot of people disagree. You probably disagree.
I mean, I think that I'm not going to poo-poo like that tactic of going to the places where there's already power and communication coming from there and trying to get them to talk about it and approach that. I don't think that's a bad approach. I just don't think it's the only thing on the table. And I don't know that like solidarity demonstrations will do things to make people feel like there are people supporting them. It'll get attention. But it's also a demonstration. That's not a direct action either in and of itself. I think that public educational events, I think that fundraising are ways of offering solidarity to the people that are facing the charges, getting funds for travel and legal fees, and getting it on people's lips. Because it doesn't have to be a one or the other. If Rachel Maddow wants to talk about it and how horrible it is, and it gets more people talking about the dangers that this sort of thing sets precedent for,
right,
that's great. But at the same time, if we can't be talking to our neighbors or our friends or our family or our church groups or whatever about this same thing, or civil libertarians in the area that we live in,
right,
they should be up in arms and upset about this. So should conservatives who believe in the Constitution. Like, so should any like legalist portions of the population that believe in people's right to assemble or anything else that's in the Constitution. I don't think that's the be-all, end-all of why I get to do something or be somewhere. But for people that believe in that contractual relationship,
right,
if you can talk to them on that level and get them inclined, then that's fine. They can do whatever actions they see fit.
Like I have a cousin who I was talking to who's like a really smart New England liberal, Democrat kind of person, but is not like isn't an idiot, And we were talking about politics and stuff, and like we were on the same page. And then I was like, "What do you think about the J20 stuff?" And she's like, "What's that?" And I told her, and she's like, "Are you kidding me?" She's like, "I don't believe you."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Look it up." And I don't believe that you don't know about this, because this is stunning. Obviously there's a lot of fundraising that can be done, so creative approaches to fundraising is a great idea. Also,
snow globes.
Mm-hmm. Snow globes.
Underutilized by the movement.
They really are. They really are. I definitely had I was telling you earlier about my ideas of making these like anti-capitalist snow globes with my 3D printer, but I dreamt more about throwing my 3D printer out the fucking window than I dreamt about using it. So fuck that thing. I'm glad I was able to sell it for.
Should have 3D printed a catapult for it.
3D printing sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like, unless we're like talking about, building little like a 3D printer that can like build Earth ships and shit. I don't give a fuck. Like when I can like get a 3D printer that will dig into the ground and like build a fucking Earth ship for me, then we're talking. Otherwise, I think I'd rather just go buy plastic junk at the store than make my own. Thank you very much.
So since we've kind of entered into the world of sci-fi right here, and you like reading sci-fi and talking about it with your guests, I'd like to just give a little note to a book that I've been reading with some friends recently, which I'm still a ways from the end of, but I'm enjoying. It's Walk Away by
Cory Doctorow.
Thank you. Better short-term memory than me. Damn. But yeah, it's this not exactly post-apocalyptic, but exacerbated world of where we are right now. Class differentials are extreme. There's big dead zones around North America and around different parts of the world. It takes place in Canada, and it's about people who decide to walk away from default, as they call it, like mainstream life, no matter what their class status is. And that's one of the tools that they have is they have the ability to, through mechanisms and I guess nanotechnology, build the tools that they want off of frameworks. They just decide, okay, we're going to get this like manual from the UN Human Rights Commission refugee project about how to simulate and build through basically 3D printers various kinds of shelters, and then they modulate that, modify it, turn it into beds and breakfasts that are for free, with like free clothing swap rooms where you can make your own costume that's also a space suit, so you can walk through the badlands of Akron, Ohio, where the air is totally poisonous. I don't know, it's a really fun exploration of meritocracy, of class society, of what maybe a post-scarcity anarchist approach towards the world might be. Family, relationships, romance, like all sorts of different stuff. And I cannot suggest it more to people. What are you reading, Soul?
Well, I'm not reading any science fiction. Right now I'm reading that Cindy Milstein book. The Cindy Milstein Grief. I keep calling it Grief, but it's actually called, what is it, Radical Mourning? Is that what it's called?
I don't know. Did Cindy edit it or author?
Yeah, she edited it. But I'm liking that. I've been reading so much lately. I just finished reading the 5th season, which is fucking crazy. Have you read that?
No, but I've heard good things.
That's amazing. I mean, I sped through that book in about a week and a half, and it was like a 400-page book or something. And that was a book it's like Earth in like 5,000 years, I think, after like global warming has destroyed everything, and there's all this like weird tectonic geological stuff happening. I mean, it's a little more of a it kind of like is somewhere between fantasy and science fiction, and like there's all this tectonic stuff, and there's these like psychic people who can like control the tectonic plates, and it's really not that political, actually. I thought it was going to be more political, but it really it wasn't a very political book, but it was a welcome escape for me. Actually, you know what? Actually, ever since I listened to your Kevin Tucker interview about neuroplasticity, or the Kevin Tucker interview about anarcho-primitivism, and he was referencing this book called The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, and the stuff he was saying about neuroplasticity and about how like the iPhone has and the internet or the mobile phone has traveled quicker through humankind
than fire.
Yeah. That really gave me pause. And so I just been like, we just ordered that book, and I just got it today. But just like this idea that like that we're being manipulated by forces that we don't understand is really making me rethink a lot of stuff. So ever since that, I've like been forcing myself to read, because I found it really difficult to read over the past few years. And after listening to this talk on neuroplasticity from Nicholas Carr, I've realized that there's actually a reason for that, and it's because my short-term memory and my ability to focus is actually being destroyed by my usage of the internet. And so I don't know. I would tell people to look in. I'm interested in reading Franco Berardi's book on neuroplasticity. Have you read that?
Did that just come out? Is that the...
Yeah.
No, but hopefully we'll be having an interview with our correspondent Gil O'Teen with Bifo on that. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
He got back with y'all?
Not yet.
Oh.
He hasn't been reached out to. The book's been read. It's a matter of just like Gil having enough time to reach out. But
That'd be cool.
yeah, he's really stoked on it.
Yeah.
Have you checked it out very much? Like,
No, I mean my reading list just went crazy. So
Yeah.
I have like 10 books right now. Ever since I got into instead of like watching terrible movies at night, I'm reading instead. Trying to fix myself because I feel messed up. I can't focus anymore, and I have because my time is more limited as a dad. I need to focus, and so it's time to get real, Bursts. It's time to get real. It's time to get a little,
get a little grit underneath the fingernails.
Yeah, get a little neuroplastic with it.
Yeah. I can grok that.
But yeah, what else? What else we got here? We got political prisoner support. This is something you've been doing for a while, or
Ish. I mean, through media, that's about the majority of the extent. We've been having on the Final Straw. We have a regular segment from Sean Swain, who's a prisoner who is politicized inside in Ohio. He's in for murder. He went in 91, I think, which he claims is self-defense. But if you've heard the show, he has a regular segment of about 5 minutes to 7 minutes, just talking about whatever comes across his eyes, like either stuff that happens in prison. He starts advocating on behalf of specific prisoners who are getting short end of the stick from the administration, or structural issues that he sees, or the consistent killing of black and brown bodies by police with no recourse, or capitalism and questions of the civilized mindset and how society operates.
I love that guy.
Dude, he's so funny. He's a real sweetie too.
Sorry to cut you off.
No.
I just every time I hear him, I'm just like, wow, this guy's spirit cannot be contained.
Yeah, he's rabid in the best possible sense of the word. But so I coming up these days is going to be the North American Anarchist Black Cross Conference, which I'm pretty excited about. And I've been attending that and engaging with Black Cross groups and folks associated with National Jericho and other prison support groups, IWOC, for a few years through the radio show. And that was one of the purposes of the show, was to be a platform for supporting people whose voices are silenced.
For those who don't know what IWOC is.
The Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee of the Industrial Workers of the World. There's a lot of
And so
acronyms.
what was it like? I don't even remember what it was. But this year there were those big prison strikes.
Well, last year, yeah, September 9th, there was a national prison strike that was called for by prisoners who were organized on the inside as incarcerated workers. There were people from the Free Alabama and Free Mississippi and Free Ohio movement who were organized on the inside against the 13th Amendment and the continuation of racialized slavery through mass incarceration in the United States, as well as unaffiliated prisoners from around the country, and I'm sure people from other groups. And then August 19th, in reference this year to Black August and the killing of George Jackson, which led to the Attica uprising, there was a prisoner-led Day of Solidarity on the inside and the outside, with a large demonstration of abolitionists in Washington, D.C., and small actions around the country. But basically I started doing this because over the years I kind of realized that I kind of came into politics in part out of an appreciation or an attempt to understand struggles in Northern Ireland. And one of the things that's really noticeable about political struggles over the years, over the centuries, but especially during the 20th century from the 60s through the 90s in Northern Ireland, was the way that there was a connection between the prisoners and the populations. There was a culture of resistance that existed not only in the Republican and mostly Catholic portions of the population, but also in their own ways in the slightly more reactionary unionist struggles. Not slightly more reactionary unionist struggles in Northern Ireland. Pretty bad. But one thing that made those movements inspirational to me was the way that they took care of the people that were on the inside. They sang songs about them, they remembered them, they did demonstrations outside of the prisons. And something in the U.S. that we don't have is a multi-generationality of struggle. We have communities that are broken up by generations, and a lot of us forget the struggles that people in our own families and people in our communities have engaged with or continue to engage with. And that's one thing I think that majorly affects our ability to actually build something strong enough to challenge the way that American society operates right now. Plus, as people deserve respect and support. And if they're just going to get forgotten about after like a couple of years because it's hard to support prisoners, then why even challenge ourselves in the first place?
Right, because if you know you're going to go in and people are going to forget about you and you're not going to have support. Yeah, and that's, I mean, again, for people who don't know, what the Anarchist Black Cross is, it's a, there's chapters all over the United States. Like Denver has had a really solid, strong chapter for a very long time. And they played a huge role in my political education, just being around them. And, they're always pointing to, first of all, it's really hard work also. It's not work I do, but it's work I've been on the periphery of, and I've always just been really impressed by, it's like, to imagine someone who's not a lawyer, who's like doing this like work of supporting political prisoners, leaves are falling, political prisoners, and they're in there, and there's only so much you can do, and it's like a feeling of like, like
powerlessness.
Yeah, I don't want to say that because it's obviously it's not powerless if you're able to like raise funds for people and like throw them that line.
So what kind of activities, like, are there any specific points in the way that Denver ABC that you engage with Denver ABC that helped to shape your politics in particular? Were there any events, any conversations you remember having, or?
Well, a couple things stand out. Like one thing that stood out, and it pissed me off at the time, or it made me defensive or whatever, was like they had a real critique of like the liberal tendencies within Occupy, whereas I was engaged in it, and they were like, okay, we're going to be engaged up to a certain point. They were there from the beginning, helping with like assemblies and all this stuff, and then afterwards, when they saw the way that like the I'm trying not to use the word liberal in my language, but the way that like more liberal, pacifist people who tried to assume leadership roles within Occupy were like trying to push things in a petty sort of electoral passive direction, and they would come out against that, and it was really important for radicals to like draw that line in the sand and say, like, we'll support you, we'll do jail support, we'll help you raise funds, but we're not down with this bullshit and these people. And so I always was really impressed by like that kind of solidarity where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna criticize all the bullshit things, but you know what, when fucking repression happens, when you're resisting, we're going to be there to help get you out of jail, and then people from Occupy ended up joining the DABC crew and Denver Anarchist Black Cross crew, and to this day, doesn't matter, like that spirit of solidarity extends to all social movements. Like if there's shit going down, if there's rowdy stuff going down, even if like everybody at the protest isn't an anarchist, you can, at a lot, I can't speak for anybody, but if they show up with the legal line, they're going to help. They're going to do everything they can to bail people out. And what I always liked about it was that through that experience of like dealing with political prisoners and not being a lawyer, but being around the legal system, going to court, developing a culture of court solidarity, doing educational things. But just by being around that culture, you start to develop also a knowledge of like, what do DAs do? What do the cops charge you with? What might you be facing? And so it's like informed my activism or my engagement with struggle to know like, okay, this is what you don't write on a call out. This is what you do write. This is what happens if I go this far. This is what happens if I don't. And sometimes it doesn't fucking matter. Sometimes you're going to get a felony just for being at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's just the way it is. But as a person who's like kind of paranoid and I like to know what I'm getting into, like just by being on the periphery of all that, it has really educated me. And some of my good friends are still engaged with it, and I know that if I have questions I can hit them up, and I know if I get in trouble I can I hope I can hit them up. So I'm trying to think what else, but yeah, I mean, it's it's just like, I just think that's a good example. I just think that sort of radical solidarity of like, I don't fuck with you, I'm not going to your meetings, you guys are wrong-headed and all this bullshit, but hey, sure, we'll
but prisons are terrible, and like I'll do my best to get you out of the clutches, right?
Yeah. And like I think that's powerful, and I think that's a good example, and it's a wonderful, it's also just a wonderful entry point for anyone in the country. It's like you're in a place where no one's doing anything, and like you're not going to be able to take the streets. Like, form an Anarchist Black Cross chapter.
Have a letter writing night.
Yeah.
Like have conversations, show trouble, do something. But yeah, I think it's a good starting point. And if stuff is going down, it's not the only model for anti-repression work, but it's a pretty solid one with other chapters around that you can ask for help from.
But then you get tied in with like the broader abolition movement and all this other stuff, and so it's like, you gotta start somewhere, Well, let's talk about your radio show. I had no idea that your show had been going for fucking 25 years. That's got to be one of the longest running.
125.
That's so cool.
Yeah. We precede radio, actually, as a technology.
No, but seriously, like I'm shocked, because 7 years ago, I mean, were you even online? Like,
yeah, so we started out doing it as a part of Asheville FM as an online radio station in Asheville as we were working towards getting a license for ourselves. And then within a couple of years, it got picked up by some friends in Northern California who I used to organize with, who had a low-power FM license, that when our info shop went away, we were left holding this nonprofit license for LPFM. And so they started running that through in association with the community media center that some of them were engaged with. Excuse me. So it started getting on the airwaves there. But yeah, just online, and then started making a podcast out of it, and a couple of other stations picked it up, and it's been about 2.5 years now that it's been airing in the town that I call home currently.
How has it changed since it started?
It was just me when it started. There was a lot of... It was kind of reminiscent of my college radio experience, a lot of ranting and a lot of music. But instead it's... Like, I started doing it because I moved away from the Bay Area, where if I wanted to, even though I didn't grow up around a lot of anarchists in my direct community, I could go down to the Bay and go to bookstores, I could go to public events, speaking events, book fairs, things like that, and engage with people. And in North Carolina, there are a plethora of anarchists, but I didn't know that when I first moved there and wasn't really networked in. So it was an opportunity for me to sort of reach out to authors whose books I wanted to read and chat with them about it, and then make that public and feel a little bit less alone. And over the years, it's changed in as far as we've been able to network better, reach out to folks in different countries and on different continents, building networks like was mentioned with Channel Zero Network and also the A Radio Network. And now William Goodenough is my awesome co-host. We switch off every few weeks, depending on how much time and availability we have. And there's a good 3 other people that help out with content from time to time. It's really like grown into something that's maybe a little unhealthy of an obsession, personally, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something in the world, I think, especially when I hear that people listen to it and it inspires them or informs them about different stuff. That's all it's there for.
Well, to me, I think one of the most innovative things I think that Final Straw has done was like when just like recording panels and like, you know, instead of being like, hey, I have to make this all about my interview with this person, it's like sometimes it's like, actually, I'm around, this amazing thing is happening, I'm just going to play this week. And, you know, it's
way easy on me.
Yeah, it's an innovation. So that's great. And I love your show. And
that was actually the first thing that we did was recording workshops from NC Rising 2, which was a series of 3 annual events that happened in North Carolina. The second one happened in 2010 in Asheville, right after the Asheville 11 case, or the May Day case, happened there, which was a bit frazzling, but yeah, recorded those and learned myself how to edit from that. Nice. And it all went from there. Yeah.
So you're using Audacity?
No, I use Reaper for the most part, which is for anyone who's in the listening audience that wants to get into editing, it's pretty easy to read. The forum community is really helpful. It's folks that have worked on, I don't know if it's Audition or some of the big like audio editing programs, came back in their own time and they wanted to make something that was more fun but also intuitive, with lots of movable parts, and that was affordable. So you can use it, the full version, forever, with annoying pop-up windows every time you start asking you for a donation, or you can pay $40 once and get a license and upload it a couple of times or update it a couple of times, or pay the full amount. And it's, there's a level of like open source trust and respect to that sort of approach, I think, by the programmers that I really appreciate. And I use Audacity for a few like blunt force things that are just easier because there's too many plugins for Reaper.
That's cool.
Nerd time.
Yeah, I use Logic, and I don't know, I don't really like it, but whatever.
But you're just used to it?
No.
You just got it?
I was using Digital Performer for so long, and then it I realized it's literally using software from 2001, and then when I was forced to update my OS like 2 years ago, I just found Logic, and I was like, whatever, I'll just try it. It's fine, whatever. Press record.
Uh-huh. Cut and paste.
Yeah. Command Y to split the region. Yeah.
That is what we must do. We must split the region.
Well, let's see what else we got here.
So I'd like to, you talked about this a little bit in your conversation with Brett from Revolutionary Left Radio, but I'd like to hear a little bit more, if you're willing to talk about it, about the influence of situationism in your approach to art and to hip hop, and what you take from that approach.
I take a lot from that approach. First of all, I just to be an asshole, I would say that I don't think the situationists would say that situationism is a thing. I feel like they were total assholes and didn't want anybody else, whatever. But in general, I think first of all, just the idea of what people later called culture jamming, in the way that the situationists were reappropriating art and using the concept of détournement. I call it deturnment. It sounds better. Of like reappropriating things for radical ends. So they would take,
like an advertisement.
They'd take an advertisement and flip it. And back then that was really radical. That was where Adbusters got that whole concept from. And so there was definitely a point where, when I went to Spain, I lived in Spain, I just read every situationist text I could get my hands on. It just really, and it continues to speak to me. And I think the main reason it speaks to me now is because we live in the society of the spectacle. We live in in a world that is mediated by image, where everything we see is controlled by an algorithm, and so that results in alienation. We're alienated from each other. I mean, I'm really working on not looking at my phone, but then when I looked at my phone earlier, I was like, wow, I must be having a lot of fun talking to these guys because I haven't looked at my phone for 3 hours, and that's, to me, those are symptoms of deep alienation, and so like with the tournament, they were like reappropriating things. And so around 2009, I had the idea. I was listening to Young Jeezy's song, My President, and, it was all about this pro-Obama shit. And I was like, man, and I had never done anything like this at the time. Like, I'd just been rapping over like weird noisy beats. And I was like, I should fucking make a Weird Al version of this song, but like that inverts it and says my president is doing the same shit. And like I would say that like my perfect anarchist analysis really wasn't even formed. Not that there is such thing, but I was still like had some liberal sensibilities in that song. But when I did it, I was like, I just started doing that. So I just started taking all these gangster songs and inverting the meanings of them and turning them into like anti-capitalist songs. And so that is one way. And I feel like, and then I met up with DJ Payne 1, who like literally does stuff with Young Jeezy and 50 Cent and all these people. And so we've taken that the next step, and really just making these songs. And that's been amazing. And again, this is something I said in the other interview, but like the phrase "go beyond art" is something the Situationists, because they came from the Dadaist tradition, and I felt like I also came from a kind of hip hop Dadaist position, and I was always like, I used to think it was John Lennon and Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie that were like driving revolutions, when really it was the other way around. The revolutions were happening and they were peripheral to it, and some of them maybe they even were feeding off of it, or part of the overall culture. And so when I became really active in organizing and struggle, I wanted to think about a way to use my art to go beyond just aesthetics, So at some points that was like during the Keystone XL pipeline stuff, or like, this was like when people weren't really doing this stuff, would be like, okay, leveraging whatever not celebrity, but like whatever kind of star power I have, to leverage that to get other artists and musicians and people from the music world who otherwise wouldn't do that, to like use their outlets to generate material support for people on the ground. So like when my homie got arrested blocking the Keystone XL pipeline in a tree sit, we were able to like raise enough money to get him out, by getting like Atmosphere and Immortal Technique to retweet some stuff. And that was like, again, this was like when doing that actually made a big difference. Like now it's like part of the course. And in general, philosophy has always just really informed my art. I see myself as a writer and a poet, but I also like to think of myself as a philosopher. I think Guy Debord was an asshole, but I think he was a hell of a poet and a thinker. And he was kind of a dictator too. So despite what he says about egalitarian stuff, he seemed to me to be a dictator, like constantly what do you call it when you kick someone out of a fucking group? Not excluding.
Expulsing?
What's the word? Excommunicate. Yeah, sure, that's fine. So yeah, those are some ways. Aside from like just like stealing lines from Situationist films. So, but yeah, I don't know. I still think there's a lot that we could. There's a lot there that people can unpack and revisit now.
Just to sort of play off this topic a little bit, the song, what's the title of the song? It might be The Banks Are Made of Marble, but the song that Dan Harrell uses for the dance
of
apology.
Marble.
Yeah. Right there, you're lining yourself in a tradition of the wobbly songsters of the turn of the 19th to 20th century, who, like Joe Hill among others, were famed for doing exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about, also coming from a pretty surrealist, I guess, background, but taking church hymns like Pie in the Sky, you know, or The Blood of the Lamb, and like modifying these things into being anti-Christian, pro-worker organizing songs. It's I think it's pretty, every time I hear that song come up, I'm like, yeah.
That's
like,
so, I don't even know who Joe Hill is.
Really?
No.
Joe Hill was a Swede who came over, immigrated to North America at the end of the 19th century. He joined the IWW and became an organizer. He was also well known for his visual arts and his songwriting. So let's see, I want to say The Banks Are Made of Marble is maybe a Ralph Chaplin song, or
that's Woody Guthrie. No, that's Pete Seeger.
No, it's before Pete
really?
Seeger. Yeah, it was a wobbly song.
Wow,
I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong. On that. But so Joe Hill is known. He was executed by the state of Utah in the late teens, I think, during the 19-teens, accused of murder, but he was probably framed up for it. And he's been a folk hero, you know, during that time and since. But a lot of his songs were taking, like I said, like Salvation Army songs and turning the lyrics to be, instead of about like how Salvation Army's great, calling it the Starvation Army and making fun of the fact that you have to go and pray to some fake god to be able to get food from these people and they don't have your best interest in mind. But really, we as the working class should organize ourselves and take over the means of production, then we can feed ourselves, and you know, they can go play their Salvation Army band in the corner if they want to.
Right.
But yeah,
that's awesome. Well, and again, like that's one of the things Mackenzie Wark said in our interview, was that Situationists took a lot from anarchists, you know, and a good quote from Guy Debord would be, "Plagiarism is necessary, progress implies it," and so a lot of it, you know, all these ideas, they get recycled, and so in some ways it just like boils down to like marketing and how ideas are packaged and represented, but you know, I think it's fucked up that, you know, that they should throw back a little, stop acting like you're inventing shit. I mean, part of that is just the folk tradition and just the way songs evolve and are passed down, but that is such an obvious détournement that Joe Hill shit, that it's like, yep, them figures.
It's great. I mean, these songs are being forced into people's ears. They were catchy, but then all you go in is just like, or you go in and you just like pause. Are they pressure washing their car?
He's always pressure washing something.
Press pauses. Yep. Starts it back up.
All right. Sorry.
Well, we were intervened with by a manic pressure washer in the neighborhood. Bless his heart.
You know, I mean, this is what it was. It's a beautiful day. It's probably the last nice day of weather we're gonna get here. So I'm glad we were outside for as long as we could do it. So.
Yeah. Well,
so what were you saying about Joe Hill? Did you have any more closing thoughts on it?
Yeah. He's dead. There's a really good book from I think it's Franklin and maybe Penelope Rosemont that was published on HR Care Publishing, which is an old leftist print house. They do a lot of surrealist stuff, and both those people were or are surrealists. But there's a big old book on Joe Hill, the history and the impacts, and research biography on the person, because he was kind of a mystery, kind of like Beach Raven, who wrote the Jungle Trilogy and Treasure of Sierra Madre, and not to be confused with the Crime Think dubstep DJ and author. But yeah.
The only other thing I'll say about that Banks of Marble song is, you know, I love that like Dan is using it, and I'm getting props for it, but I actually didn't write that song. That was not ghost written, but written by my I guess one of my best friends, this guy Pedestrian, who I started Anacon with, and yeah, that was like the first song anyone else had ever written for me, and he's actually the only other person who's ever written for me.
No, that's awesome.
And he's someone who deeply has studied folk traditions and just going back hundreds of years, so he's a total song music nerd, so you know, just to put that out there.
Check out some Pedestrian.
Yeah, check him out. It's actually, I'm about to release a new album from him in December. So
When does it, as the kids say, drop? December, you say?
December 1st,
Okay.
I guess.
And if people are looking for it, can you give folks your website where they can find your podcast and that album where it's going to...
You can go to soul1.org, SOLEONE.org. It'll be there. I'll be there. Check it out on Twitter.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I don't know. We only got through 4 of our subjects. We didn't even get to talk about nihilism, but save that for another day.
Yeah, we can do this over phone, or you can come out and visit me sometime.
I'm down.
All right.
I'm totally down. Who knows? I may be out there sooner. I may be closer and sooner than you think. So if people want to listen to check your stuff out, what's the...
You can go to thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and there's a link to how to podcast it there. If you're interested, if you have a community radio station in your area and you think that the kinds of interviews you see there would fit well on your airwaves, or you want random people to hear it during the day or night, you can check out our archive collection. That's also linked from our website for FCC-friendly 59-minute long radio shows. And you can find in that archive collection, or either site, you can find us going back 7.5 years. Back to the beginnings. Back to before radio existed. Follow us on all the nasty social media platforms and listen to Channel Zero because it's fucking awesome.